Hi guys, it's Shanae and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm continuing my read along for ErHa Volume 3, and we left off on a very rough end of a chapter, so I have my tissues ready just in case I need them again during this live. I'm hoping not, but a lot of you seemed very convinced that I was going to be needing it just for every single live until we finish this volume, so better safe than sorry, I guess. I'm a little bit stressed. If you guys can't tell, the last one really put me through the ringer. I'm gonna try and do another 40 pages today with the usual 10-minute break on the hour. Just for anyone who is new here and maybe doesn't know how I run things usually. But yeah, I'm very nervous about this. I haven't been sleeping very well, so I might also just be more emotional because of that, which is great. We love it when a emotional book catches you at an even more emotional time than usual. So yeah. Anyway, okay. With that said, let me just quickly think. Is there anything else? I have my tea here with me, and yeah, I think that's more or less it. So while we wait, let me quickly find the page that we're on so long. So, this is what I wanted to say. So for me personally, I think there's three possibilities as to where it can go from now. So, number one, most likely but potentially least interesting, is we start from exactly the same space that we started when he first was reborn. Second option, in my opinion, is we start a little bit closer to the events that just transpired, which means he has less time to try and rectify the same mistakes that he's now made twice. I mean, it's not his fault, really, it just kind of happened. But yeah. Because then we kind of have this like countdown motif going on where he can't just keep on dying and retrying because he's not gonna keep on having the same amount of chances to correct the same things. Um, and then the last option that I think we might see is him seeing how things play out after his death. That is something I'd be very curious about, but I don't know if if Meat Bum is up for treating us to something like that, because that would honestly be a treat in my opinion, like seeing how Chuaning handles Moran's death, and seeing like if Moran's death leads to the world conquering of the orange tree guy. So you know, there's a lot of ways that this could go, and maybe I haven't even like touched on the thing that we're about to see happen. So anyway, okay, with all the speculation out of the way, I think we can get started. I just kind of wanted to put them out there as like where my head is at right now. Hi, how are you? Okay, I have my pillow here with me just as like an armrest as well. Okay, we are on. Oh, sorry, just also, I forgot. I hope the audio is okay. I tried to make sure that it's okay, but it did seem a little bit soft, but I couldn't figure out what to do to fix that. So I hope it's still okay. Hi! Okay, so we are on page 103, chapter 97, this venerable one, dot dot dot. Which sounds not at all foreboding. I'm tired but excited for the stream. Oh no, I hope you still enjoy it. I'm sorry that you're tired. I feel you. And hi. Okay, are we ready? Are we ready? I'm not. I'm not. Moran. Moran. Someone was calling him. Moran opened his eyes, bleary and dazed, to the sight of an unfocused silhouette in white. He vaguely felt that this person looked like Chuaning, but at the same time, He didn't quite dare believe it. He felt that person's hand laid over his chest, channeling an unbroken stream of spiritual energy into the still bleeding wreckage. What? I thought for sure he was dead. Okay. So warm. He blinked, arduously, trying to get a better look at the blurry figure. Moran? Shizun? He murmured, fighting down the blood welling in his throat. He felt something warm and wet fall on his cheek. I'm assuming a tear? Oh no. Slowly, his vision cleared enough to see a pair of phoenix eyes like the apricot blossoms of Jiangnan, softly beautiful with a hint of melancholy, set in a face that was as pale as death and streaked with blood. Moran stared foggily at him, at a loss. He had never before seen such an expression on Chuaning's face. Shizun had always been cold, impassive. But the person before him was now crying. Moran reached a hand up, wanting to touch, wanting to check if this was real or just an hallucination of a dying man. But with the tips of his fingers mere inches from that person's face, he paused. Sometimes, hating someone was a kind of habit. If, all of a sudden, he didn't hate Chuaning anymore, he wouldn't know what to do with himself. He didn't dare touch. He was afraid it might be real, but also afraid it might not be. Deadly words. Behind Chuaning, Moran spied mountains of corpses and oceans of blood. Moran wasn't sure if this was the battleground at Butterfly Town, or if he'd already gone to hell. He was imminently aware that he had committed countless atrocities, had sinned irredeemably, that he belonged in the infinite hells, never again to enter the cycle of reincarnation. But Chuaning was a good person. Why would he be here with him, to suffer an eternity in hell? Says the man who was just like cursing Chuaning to the ends of the earth and back again, not even 2 pages ago. And your bias is showing. Just a little longer. Chuaning's voice was distant and hazy, as if coming to him from the depth of an ocean. You have to stay awake, or else. Moran watched blood seep from the corner of Chuaning's mouth. The golden light grew more and more brilliant until the person before him was suddenly enveloped in the blinding glow and shrank, taking on the small form of a child. Damn. Okay, so Meatbun is just like, she's just gonna throw everything plus the kitchen sink at us and just hope we survive. Okay. Or else you are no disciple of the Yuheng Elder, no disciple of mine. Shashadi? Chuaning had transformed into Shasani before his eyes. Moran was so shocked that his wound blazed with pain. He passed out again before he could process a single thought. Moran, his voice so soft it was almost a sigh. He didn't know if it was a hallucination from his past life, or a lingering murmur by his ear. I'm sorry. It was this master's fault. This line again. This line again? Chuaning, I don't want you to apologize. I want you to... To what? He faltered, not knowing what it was that he wanted. If he didn't want an apology, then what did he want? I'm glad you're asking yourself the important questions, because that's what we've been wondering the entire time. Moran's eyes flew open. His breath came out in harsh pants, and his clothes were soaked with sweat. He looked up to see a clean, tidy room, sparsely decorated. He was back in his Shizun Peak room. He was still alive. He glanced around in disbelief, then raised a slightly chilly hand to feel for the wound on his chest. It was wrapped in several layers of bandages. Blood had seeped through the gauze and dyed it red, and it ached when touched. But underneath, his heart still beat rhythmically, powerfully, beating with the promise of the rest of his life. And my brain just immediately went to catastrophizing, like, what if Chuanin gave his life for you? I don't think that's what happened, but also I wouldn't put it past me, Bun. He lived. He lived? His blood coursed wildly, vigorously through his youthful body. The tips of his fingers trembled with it. It thrummed through his very soul. He heard the soft swish of a curtain being lifted. Moran looked up from where he sat on the bed and came face to face with the beauty that had just entered. It must have been cold outside. His long black hair cascaded loosely over a white fur-lined mantle, and when he lifted those soft, bright eyes, a faint redness dyed their corners, more lovely than any makeup. Shmei started a little. He hadn't expected Moran to be awake. Aran, you... Shmei! Shmei! Moran called his name over and over, eyes as bright and glittering as obsidian. He jumped up from the bed, ignoring the protests of his wound, and grinned toothily as he flung himself at Shi Mingjing. He hugged him tightly and repeated ecstatically, "I'm so glad. You're alive. I'm alive. It's over. It's all over." This is too good to be true. The heavenly rift had been the greatest calamity of his past life. Fiends and demons had descended from above, stolen Shimei, and thrown Moran into the abyss of sin. This was the one thing that had haunted him after rebirth. He had been afraid it would happen all over again, that he would be left all alone once more, on the lonely path towards that empty Wushan palace, treading on the bones of those he had once loved and cared for. But the heavens were not unkind to him. Yet everything had changed when he stepped forward with the will to die in Shimei's place. He wouldn't be alone again, abandoned and rebuked by all. Wouldn't be cast out in the dead of night, henceforth a lonely wanderer. Starting today, the curse was broken. Every single word of optimism from this man's mouth is giving me PTSD. Stressed. Where am I? Okay, sorry, I'm Ran clung to Shimei for a long time. When he let go, his eyes were bright like fireworks, glittering like the starry night. Shimei stood dazed and unmoving, while Moran wrapped his arms around his shoulders and smiled down at him. They stayed that way for several minutes before Shimei slowly came back to his senses and leaned in to press his forehead to the underside of Moran's jaw. Aran? Shimei lifted his face. He wore a faint smile, but his eyes were a little wet. "I'm glad you're okay." Moran smiled and stroked his hair, then gathered Shimei's hands in his own. "Of course I'm okay, silly," he reassured him. "Why wouldn't I be? Before he could say more, the curtain was lifted again and another figure strode in. Shumum? No response. This guy was also so pretty. He was probably still upset to... So, I said pretty, it says petty. Excuse me. No response. This guy was always so petty. He was probably still upset to have been outdone at the Battle of Butterfly Town. Or he's lost his tongue. I'm way too negative right now. Shimeng wore a sullen expression, and his lips were pressed into a thin line. When he saw Moran up and about, he paused for a beat before turning to Shimei. When did he wake up? Shimei hesitated before answering. A hint of worry crept into his voice, and he said, "Just now." Another pause. "I see." Shimei still refused to look at Moran. "Look at this little brat," Moran thought to himself, sulking like this just because he didn't get to be the hero. He's acting like someone stole his candy or something. Or he's acting like Chuaning is dead, or in like fatal, near fatal condition. Like, could you imagine Moran going through all this to save Shimei, then losing Chuaning and Shumeng becoming the new, like, Moran because of it? Could you imagine? But Moran was in quite a buoyant mood, so for once he was willing to overlook it. He smiled and said, "Looks like I was out for a while there, huh? Who brought me back?" "Who else?" Shimon flung his sleeve and tucked his hands behind his back. "It was Shizun, of course." Ah. Moran was taken aback at this revelation. Fragments of blurry memory from his half-conscious state passed before his eyes. Now that he was awake, he was so overwhelmed with shock and elation that he was even less sure what of the things he'd seen back then were real or imagined. "Shizun," he mumbled. Shidi. At this, Shumeng twitched almost imperceptibly. "So," he asked stiffly, "you saw?" "Saw what?" "That Shidi is Shizun?" Moran had still been only guessing. Upon being suddenly told outright like this, his entire face went white. "What?" Shumeng's head snapped around to stare at him. He wore a strange expression, as though were taking all he had to keep some emotion in check. "What do you mean, what? I thought you already knew." "How would I know that?" Moran yelped. I was drifting in and out, and it was all blurry. I thought I might have seen the two of them overlapping. He thought back to the time he'd spent with Shasini at the Peach Blossom Springs, and the two of them asleep in the same bed. He thought back to when he'd lost control at Rainbow Isle, and the gold hair clasp that had tumbled out as he tore at Chuaning's robes, and the handkerchief embroidered with a high-tongued blossom. Clothing that grew and shrank with its wearer. The little jar of chicken soup, clutched tightly in Shini's arms. The way he had looked up at Moran and called him Shishong, and how Moran had patted him on the head and grinned, saying, "We'll be brothers from here on out. Shishong will dote on you. Will date on you. We wish, we wish." Easy Dune, we're with you, thank you. Dark Shumung, goodness, that's horrible. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I think it's always worse when it's someone that used to be very sunny that suddenly becomes this dark embodiment. Um, One after another, those memories rose before his eyes and scattered like smoke. Now it was Chuaning, his face impassive, expression far too cold. Now it was Shasini, his lips pressed together, refusing to speak. He had once told Shasini that Chuaning was no good, that he disliked him. He had also once patiently brushed Shasini's long hair. His hair had been so soft, flowing between his fingers like ink. Now that he thought about it, they really were so much alike. Moran felt like his head was about to explode. He paced in a tight circle back and forth as he muttered, "Shizun is Shashidi? Shizun is Shashidi. Shizun is..." He came to an abrupt stop, almost crazed. "You've got to be kidding me! How could Shizun possibly be Shashidi?" Aran? Moran didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is making me think of Tianguan Sifu, but anyway. Dark Shimeng is hot, to be honest. Is he dark though? Please don't spoil if he does end up being dark, but it's not now. Moran didn't know whether to start or cry. Sure, they're pretty similar in a lot of ways, but they're not the same. Shashidi is such a good person. The hell do you mean by that? Shimon cut him off, pinning him with a sharp glare. Shashidi is such a good person? So what, someone who's a good person couldn't possibly be Shizun? Of course I'm not saying Shizun isn't a good person, Moran countered. It's just that Shashidi has always been so sincere with me. I basically viewed him as my own little brother. How am I supposed to just accept it when you suddenly tell me he's actually Shizun? Shashidi is sincere? Huh? Shimeng snarled. Then Shizun is insincere? You can't win. Moran, give up. Hearing the temper rising in Shimeng's voice, Shimei hurried to tug on his sleeve. Young master, remember what uncle said. Aran just woke up. But Shimeng shook him off, his brown eyes still fixed on Moran's face. So infuriated was he that the vein at his neck throbbed like a hissing viper about to sink venomous fangs into its prey or ready to devour it. Mowayu, you'd better explain to me here and now. Why can't Shizun be Shashini? In what does he lack sincerity, huh? Tell me clearly, what part of him do you consider fake? The interrogative onslaught rankled Moran only a little. It wasn't like he hadn't seen Shimon pissed off before. In the last life, Simon had been more or less like this during every single one of their encounters after he became Emperor Taxianjun. Still, it was irksome. Moran frowned and snapped, What's it to you? That's between me and him. Between you and him? Shimon repeated. Have you ever even thought about him? So mad he laughed. The hell's your problem? Shujinmin? Seriously, when did you finally lose it? Come on, Shimei, let's go to Loyalty Hall. Maybe Uncle and Shizun know what set him off. He brushed past Shimon, pulling Shimei along. Shimon stood rooted in place for some time, as if trying his damnedest to stop himself. But just as Moran was about to step out the door, his restraint cracked, and he whipped around, roaring, Mowaye, have you ever once spared a thought for this Shizun of yours? Moran said nothing. He became even more agitated. His steps faltered, and his originally cheerful and relaxed brows drew low in a scowl. Shimei squeezed his hand. Don't mind him, he whispered uneasily. He's been a bit irritable lately. Come on, let's go. Moran paused. But his hand had only brushed the curtain, hadn't even lifted it, when Shumeng's voice rang out again, stifled, inflamed and distraught, like it had leapt from a raging fire. I'm not going to be cursing all of that, but suffice to say, he calls Moran a few names. The curtain dropped back into place with a swish. Moran closed his eyes, then opened them again. Aran? Shimei tried to pull him back, but Moran gently pushed him aside. Moran turned his head to look at Shimei, then faced him squarely. The two of them were around the same age, but Moran was already taller by a span, and he could appear quite cold and menacing when he wanted to. His mouth curved into a smile, but his black eyes were deep, without the slightest hint of mirth. So, I'm a piece of trash now, am I? Shujimin, I've never treated our Shizun with anything but respect, nor did I stand idly by at the battle of the Heavenly Rift. The barrier to the infinite hells couldn't be mended by his strength alone, so I stepped up to help. Let me ask you, as his disciple, have I done anything wrong? Shimon remained silent. My strength falls far short of his, so I couldn't hold out till the end when we were mending the barrier. I fell from the coiled dragon pillar, but he didn't spare me so much as a glance. He couldn't care less whether I lived or died. Let me ask you again. In my shoes, would you not feel bitter and disappointed? But you saw him come to help you, though. Or do you still think it was Shashni? Moran finally gave voice to the grievance that had eaten away at him for 2 lifetimes. His handsome features twisted into something dark as he spoke of that sore spot. He forced out each syllable, enunciating every word. As I see it, I've done my duty and owe him nothing. What right do you have to stand here before me and call me a piece of trash? Shimon, you think I've never cared for him? You're wrong. I have. Tell us more about that. But he's made of stone. Moran continued in a low voice. Please? There's 2 options here in my brain right now. Either Chuaning is dead or close to dead, or he's standing right behind Moran to hear all of that. And if either of those things happen, I'm gonna cry. Continued in a low voice, every word like a knife to his heart, each one drawing blood. Shimon, listen to me. I don't care how powerful a cultivator he is in the eyes of the world, what a prestigious Zongshi he is, that he's Yuheng of the night sky, Baidu immortal. None of that matters. What matters is this. At the Battle of Heavenly Rift, I nearly died. Yet when I begged for him to look back, to spare me a glance, he wouldn't even give me that. It was such a chilling, enraging thing, but as he spoke of it, he was strangely calm. Only his eyes were a little red. And Shimon, I can guarantee you, no matter who had fallen from that pillar back then, even if it wasn't me, even if it was you or Shimei, he wouldn't have saved you either, because I saw it with my own eyes. That part he thought he didn't say, but then again, they saw Chuaning save him, so he's talking nonsense in their eyes. Chuaning had turned and left his own disciple's body to cool in the snowstorm that blotted out the sky. After all, nothing is more important than his good name as the Baidu Immortal. Moran sneered coldly. Perhaps it was due to the room's dim light that he looked a little forlorn. You'll live if you're lucky, die if you're not. His last word was still hung in the air when there came a blur before his eyes, alongside a rush of wind. The room was narrow, and Shimei was behind him. Even if he sensed it coming, Moran couldn't have dodged lest Shimei come to harm. He stood his ground and took the blow. Shimei lunged at him like a cheetah, gripping him by the collar, and a loud crack rang out as he struck Moran across the face, holding nothing back. At being slapped out of the blue, Moran's temper flared as well. He twisted his wrist to seize the raging youth and snarled through gritted teeth. Shizun, the hell do you think you're doing? Shimon didn't answer, bellowing, "More you bastard." He had no interest in talking anymore, but rampaged like he really had lost his mind. He brawled brutally with Moran right there in that desolate little room. The 2 instantly at each other's throats like a pair of trapped beasts. They fought like they wanted to rip each other to ribbons, like they wanted to tear one another apart and swallow each other's blood, bone and all. A single lamp flickered in the room, and it cast their maddened silhouettes against the stone wall, like a shadow play of bloodthirsty beasts or a picture of frenzied demons. That is very grim but stunning imagery. Suddenly, Moran heard Shimon choke back a sob. It was so quiet that he suspected he'd misheard. but just as he thought so, several fat teardrops splashed onto the back of his hand. Shimeng suddenly released Moran and shoved him away. Then he curled up on the ground, wrapped his arms around his knees, and started bawling miserably where he sat. Moran's cheek was yet red and swollen, but he was utterly stumped by this turn of events. It wasn't like he actually attempted any deadly moves. Surely he hadn't hurt him that bad. Besides, his cousin had thrown the first punch, so why'd he... He was still puzzling it over when Shimeng raised his voice, screaming hoarsely between broken sobs. How could you say he didn't save you? How can you say he didn't save you? Tears rolled down his cheeks, insuppressible. This is all leading me to believe that Shimeng is dead or dying. Off to the side, Shimei sighed and looked down in silence. It seemed that Shimeng couldn't keep things quiet after all. Between sobs, Shimeng choked out, "He'd be so sad if he heard you say that from the underworld." You just dropped that bomb on us? Shimeng, I know you don't have any mercy for Moran, but have some mercy on the audience. Words were too sudden. Moran couldn't process them at first. In a daze, he asked, "What?" Shimeng wept on and on. His venomous fangs had indeed pierced Moran's neck, but he had also pricked himself. He cried so miserably, so brokenly, wiping desperately at his face, at his eyes, his gaze flickering between ferocity and sorrow. Shimeng refused to get up from where he crouched on the floor. There he stayed, his face buried in the crook of his arm, for a long, long time. Moran felt a slow numbness creep up from the soles of his feet until his entire body was frozen. He felt his lips move, heard his voice ask, "Shimeng, what did you just say?" Shimeng sobbed for what seemed like ages, or perhaps it was actually seconds, and only felt like an eternity to Moran as he waited for that thunderbolt of an answer. "Shizun," Shimeng finally choked out. "He's gone." Okay, hold on. Let me just quickly retract my tears for like 2 seconds to speculate. He didn't say dead, he said gone, which might imply that he was pulled into the underworld while trying to close the rift. In which case we can just go on like a merry rescue mission to go get him, right? Because things are always that easy, right? I shouldn't get my hopes up. We're only 30 minutes in and I'm already gone through so many emotions. Oh, and I just lost my space. Okay. For a moment, Moran said nothing. His whole body felt cold. Distantly, he heard those words, yet couldn't seem to comprehend them. Gone? What do you mean gone? Gone where? Who's gone? Who's gone? Who's gone? Shimeng lifted his head slowly. There was hatred in his eyes, and mockery, and the deepest pain and loathing. Do you know why he didn't look back? Moran stared mutely. Father said that sealing the heavenly rift took everything in him. Did you think you were the only one stuck by the fiendish energy of the ghost realm? The discernment barrier is twined. Whatever damage you took, he suffered the same. It's just that he endured it in silence and said nothing to anyone. Moran felt a droning between his ears. Then when he didn't save Shimei in the previous lifetime, was that also because... He didn't dare finish the thought. The tips of his fingers shook. No way, but he was so poised. When has he ever been anything but poised before others? Fresh tears welled up and overflowed Shimeng's eyes as he spoke. By the time he came down, his spiritual energy had been exhausted. Why do you think he put a protective barrier around you and left without looking back? Shimeng's voice dripped with tears of blood. Shizun knew he couldn't hang on for much longer because his cultivation was high, so the moment he showed any sign of weakness, all the fiends would be drawn to him. Moran, did you really think he left because he abandoned you? Moran was speechless, struck dumb. He left to protect you, Mowayer, so you wouldn't get caught up in that. The fiends went berserk when the gateway to the infinite hells closed. The battle dragged on till nightfall. So many were killed or injured. Who had time for you? Even my father didn't know you were gone until he was already back at Shizun Peak with the injured Shunji elder. Shimeng paused for a second, his breathing harsh, before forcing the rest of the words through the tightness in his throat. Mowayer. He was the one who brought you back. He was the one who took a pill to let him regain his original form, so he could pull you up from the bloody wreckage, from the mountain of corpses. He was the one covered in wounds, but he still passed you the last remnants of his spiritual power. No way. He brought you home. You were unconscious, and his spiritual energy was completely drained. He was no different from an ordinary person at that time. He couldn't use a single technique, not even a simple communication spell. He could only carry you on his back and climb up the stairs to Shizun Peak step by step. No. The 3,000 steps, without any spiritual power. Moran closed his eyes. He could almost see, there under the pale moonlight, Chuaning carrying a barely breathing Moran, climbing haltingly up those endless stairs, white robes stained a bloody crimson. That person who had been so distant and unreachable, so pristine and untarnished. Baidu immortal, Yuheng of the night sky. Moran's throat was tight, his voice shook. No way, how did he... I'm not okay, guys. Oh, no, they did not. We have art, because of course we have art of the worst moments in the volume so far, I would say. Okay, here it is. It's stunningly done. The artist really knows how to torment us, but torment it is nonetheless. I wondered the same. Shimon stared into the distance with red-rimmed eyes, looking lost. When I spotted him, I thought that surely I had gone mad. Surely I was seeing things, because I was also thinking. The rest came out in a sigh. How did he even? No way. Moran choked on a low sob and clutched at his head. He murmured helplessly, no way. The stairs are still stained with trail of blood. That's the road he took to bring you home. Shimeng's hatred made him ruthless. Go look for yourself, Moran. Go look. No way. The shock and helplessness were more than he could bear. Moran flew into a rage. Without warning, he grabbed, luckily didn't stab, grabbed Shimeng, hauled him up off the ground and slammed him into the wall. His features twisted into something bestial. No way. No frickin' way. How could he have saved me? He's always disliked me, always looked down on me. Shimeng said nothing for a moment. Then his mouth bent into a miserable grin. Mowayer, it's not that he looked down on you. In the guttering candlelight, Shimeng raised his eyes, lashes damp with tears, and leveled him with a gaze suffused with hatred. I haven't even looked yet, but if he says you look down on him, I'm gonna cry. Okay? It's that I look down on you. Moran could only stare at him. I look down on you. Shrenji Aldo looks down on you. Tanlong Aldo looks down on you. Who the hell do you think you are? Shimon chewed up the words and spit them in Moran's face. You bastard. You... Shimon burst out laughing, tilting his head back to look at the dim ceiling. Moran, in all assertion pique, he was the one who thought most highly of you, and this is how you repaid him. He laughed and laughed, then he squeezed his eyes shut and tears began to fall again. This time he wept quietly. Moran, your Shidi, my Shizun, he's dead. Damn it. Moran had been bitten by the most venomous snake in the world. He let go of Shimon, as if burned, and stumbled backwards. For the first time, he understood those words. His entire body began to tremble. Go. Shimon suddenly called out to him. Moran continued backing away, until his back collided with the ice-cold wall. There was no escaping. Go. Shimon had finally stopped crying, but his voice was flat, like he was dead. We don't have a Shizun anymore. Let's just all take a moment to cry together. Let's just form a crying circle. Okay, I just retrieved my bookmark. I can barely think right now. Oh, let's see what's going on here. Be mindful of spoilers, guys, but I think we should be good. Oh, there's a lot of arts of the ladder scene. Oh, great! We love it when we're tormented. Stairs are a wound to the fans. I see bloody stairs and I know it's from this and I hurt. Great, I think I saw an image of bloody stairs and I had no clue or context. I didn't know it was from ErHa because I just saw it on someone's page. And I think that might have been in reference to this. So we love that for us. Yeah, stairs is a trigger word in the ErHa fandom. That's just great. Oh my word, all the bad connotations we end up developing to things because of anime. Okay. There's still 15 minutes left before the 10-minute break. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it. Oh, okay. How are you guys doing? Are you okay? Is it just me? So we are on page 119, chapter 98. Title cannot make me cry. I'm not gonna be able to do this chapter if I start crying now. Shizun, I'm begging you, please pay attention to me. They better like kill me and give me aftercare in volume 4. I'm used to it, but I feel for you. Ouch, okay. Shame. Okay. Shizun Peak had a cliff with a funny name called Ah. There were numerous stories within the sect as to how this name came to be. The most common was the people often fell from it due to how sheer it was, crying out, Ah. I'm not going to cry it out because I don't want to accidentally damage your guys' eardrums. Oh no, I'm so scared. But Moran knew that wasn't the reason. The cliff rose high into the clouds, steep and nigh impossible to scale. It was terribly cold and its top was covered in snow year-round. This was where the dead of Shizun Peak lay while they awaited their funerals. Moran had only ever come here once in his past life. Then, as now, it had been after the bloody battle that followed the opening of the rift to the infinite hells, which had ended countless lives. Shimei among them. He had refused to accept reality and had knelt by Shimei's coffin for days on end, gazing at his face within it, which looked almost as if he were merely asleep. It's called from back when your dad passed, was what Shu Zhengyong had revealed to him in the past life as he accompanied his nephew in the chill air of the Frost Sky Hall. I only had one brother. We found Shizun Peak together, but your dad, he was stubborn, just like you. He barely even got to enjoy the good life. Or maybe he got sick of it. But one slip against the demons and he was gone. We need more things to cry about, right? It was freezing inside Frost Sky Hall. Shu Zhengyong took a swig from the sheepskin of wine he'd brought, then offered it to Moran. Here, have some. Just don't tell your aunt. Moran didn't take it, didn't move. Shu Zhengyong sighed. I was so miserable in those days. It felt like my heart had been dug out. All I did was sit up here with your dad and cry. I sound pretty awful when I cry. I was just howling like, ah. And that's where the name came from. He glanced at Moran and clapped him on the shoulder. Your uncle isn't well read or anything, but I know this much. Life is ephemeral, like the morning dew, over in a blink. Mingjing's just gone on a bit ahead of you. You can be brothers again in the next life. Why am I crying over, like, Shimei when he's not even the one who's passed in this instance? Okay. Moran slowly closed his eyes. Condolences and whatnot are just words, Shu Zhengyong continued. If you're sad, go ahead and cry. If you don't want to leave, stay and keep him company. But you have to eat, and you have to drink your water. Go grab a bite at Ningpo Hall. After that, you can come back here and kneel as long as you want. I won't stop you. Frost Sky Hall was frigid and silent. White silk drifted lightly within the grand hall, like gentle fingers brushing the brow. Moran gradually opened his eyes. The coffin was the same as the one in his memory, cast from the black snow of Kunlun, lustrous and translucent, with the threads of a frozen mist streaming from the surface. Only this time, the body lying inside was Chuaning's. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Then I imagined that the one to die in the heavenly rift in this lifetime would be Chuaning. He was really taken by surprise. He didn't know how to react. Faced with this person's ice-cold body, he found that he didn't feel much of anything. Not joy at the death of his foe, nor grief at the passing of his Shizun. Moran stared at Chuaning through lowered lashes for a long while, almost disbelieving. His face appeared even colder than usual, now covered in a layer of frost in truth. Flecks of ice clung to his closed lashes, his lips were a pale blue, and his skin was nearly transparent, the faint blue of veins visible like minute cracks in porcelain. Oh no, okay, give me a second. fact about me that you guys don't usually get to see because I cut this out of the reactions. But I have a tendency to like accidentally work myself up even more if I'm feeling a certain emotion. So I'm trying really hard not to do that right now. Maybe it might be a good idea to take the break now because I'm struggling to read. Okay, are you guys okay with me taking the 10 minutes now, even though I'm fully aware that it's not gonna get better once I come back, but I think maybe taking the break now will help me to compose myself enough, hopefully, for when we return. Okay. Yeah, it is, and I think what's like getting to me, like one of the things that just cropped up in my head as I was reading, which is like making it worse for me, is the fact that it was acknowledged so many times that Chuaning hates the cold and is like very sensitive to the cold and all of that. So like, what a way to go for someone like that. Okay, I think we're gonna take the break now before I work myself up again. And dribbling water too. Um, and yeah, I shall see you guys again at 2 past then. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I have new tea with me, because hopefully that'll help, and water as well. And I think just maybe during the next live I won't be wearing any mascara just to be safe. Maybe any like makeup. Um, but anyway, okay, let's get back to it. Attempt to at least. But if this is the track record we're gonna get for the rest of this volume, this is gonna be quite a few read-alongs because I think all the crying is slowing down my reading pace quite a bit. So sorry about that. But yeah, I think we can get started again. Just make sure. So we are at like the second paragraph from the top of page 121 for anyone who wants to follow along. How could he have been the one to die? Moran raised his hand to touch Chuaning's cheek. It was cold. His hand traced down to his throat, to his neck. There was no pulse. And then to his hand. He gripped it. The joints were already beginning to stiffen. Well, if I wasn't upset already. Just remember that the more vicious the pain, the more poignant the warm, soft moments. That's how ErHa is. I know, but the like getting there, it's like, yeah, you were getting to a flower bed of petals, but first we have to cross all these thorns. I don't have. I'm gonna need shoes. Okay. The joints were already beginning to stiffen, and the skin there felt rough. Moran thought it strange. The tips of Chuaning's fingers were lightly calloused, but his palms had always been soft and delicate. Despite himself, he looked closer. Scores of lacerations covered his hands, open cuts that, although cleaned, would never heal. He remembered Chu Meng's words. His spiritual energy was completely drained. He was no different from an ordinary person at that time. He couldn't use a single technique, not even a simple communication spell. He could only carry you on his back and climb up the stairs of Shizun Peak step by step. And when he couldn't do that anymore, when he couldn't even stand, he had crawled on the ground on his knees, dragging him until his fingers were torn and his hands covered in blood, all to bring him home. Was it you who carried me back? Moran muttered hollowly. His question was met with only silence. Chuaning, was it you? Silence, no reply. I won't believe it unless you nod, Moran said to the man in the coffin. His expression was placid, as if fully expecting the person before him to wake up. Chuaning, give me a nod, just one nod, and I'll believe you, and I won't hate you anymore. Just one nod, okay? Taking like a very quick break from the absolute sadness that is that request, it's kind of to me an interesting example of all the impossible asks that Moran is always just asking of Chuaning and not thinking twice about. Like, obviously this time he's actually aware of how impossible the ask is. But this isn't the first time that his asks have been impossible and that he hasn't really thought about it. Chuaning only lay there, cold and expressionless, as if it made no difference to him whether Moran hated him or not. He himself had left with a clear conscience, abandoning the living to their guilt. Living or dead, this person had always been more maddening than he was pitiable. Moran sneered. "Then again," he said, "when have you ever listened to me?" As he stared at Chuaning, he suddenly felt that the whole thing was too absurd. All these years he'd hated Chuaning for looking down on him. The hatred had deepened when he failed to save Shimei. For over a decade, this hatred had festered, twisting and turning his heart. Then, one day, out of nowhere, he was told, when Chuaning turned and left back then, it was to protect you. He was suddenly told that the discernment barrier was twined. Whatever damage he took, he suffered the same. His spirit energy was spent. He couldn't even protect himself anymore. Great, awesome, perfect. Chuaning was right in everything he did. Then what about Moran? Head in the dark, like a know-nothing idiot, running in circles like a frickin' clown, hissing and snarling in his hatred for so long. And for what? Oops, sorry. But fair question. A brief misunderstanding was like a smidge of dirt on a healing wound. As long as it was discovered in time, washed off, and the salve reapplied, everything would be fine. But if the misunderstanding was allowed to persist for 10, 20 years, if the person trapped in that web poured in endless hatred, worries, repression, and even his life, these emotions would scab over and grow into new skin, would become part of one's body, and then to suddenly be told, "That's not how it is, you've got it all wrong." What then? The dirt had lodged under the skin with the passing of time, already been subsumed into the blood. To remove that bygone hatred, the healed flesh would have to be ripped open again. A misunderstanding of 1 year is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding of 10 years is an injustice. A misunderstanding of a lifetime, from life unto death, is fate. Their fate was blighted. Okay. The heavy gates of Frost Sky Hall swung slowly open, just as in the previous lifetime, Zhu Zhengyong, a sheepskin of wine in his hand, trod heavily to Moran's side and sat on the floor beside him. "I heard you were here. Uncle will keep you company." Zhu Zhengyong's fierce eyes were red. He had plainly been crying not too long ago. And him too. Moran said nothing. Zhu Zhengyong twisted open the cap of the sheepskin and drank deeply before falling silent. He wiped roughly at his face and, with great effort, summoned a grin. "Yu Heng never liked it when I drank, but now," he sighed. "No, never mind. I'm not even that old, but I've already seen off so many friends. Renar, do you know how that feels?" Unfortunately, he does. Meatbun's metaphors. They're killer, literally and figuratively. Moran lowered his lashes, silent. Zhu Zhengyong had asked him the same question in his past life. Back then, he'd only had eyes for Shimei's lifeless body. What did he care for others if others lived or died? He didn't understand, and he didn't want to. But how could he not understand now? Before he had been reborn, he had stood alone in the empty halls of the Wushan Palace. One day, he had dreamt of a long-gone days as Yu Heng's disciple, a and had jolted awake from his light slumber, gripped by a sudden impulse to visit his old room in the disciple quarters. We opened the door and stepped inside. The narrow room, unused for so long, was covered in a layer of fine dust. He had found a small fragrance burner toppled onto the floor, knocked over by someone many years ago. He picked it up and moved out of habit to put it back in its customary place. But the years had flown by like a swift stream. Holding the burner, he suddenly froze. Where did I used to keep this burner? He couldn't remember. His eagle-like gaze swept across the attendants behind him, but their faces were blurs. He couldn't tell one from another. But of course these people wouldn't know where in his old room the youthful emperor used to keep this fragrance burner. Where did I keep this burner? He couldn't remember, and anyone who could was dead or gone. How could Moran not understand how Xu Jingyong felt right now? Every now and then, out of the blue, I'll recall some joke from my youth and blurt it out. But then I realize not a single person who gets it is around anymore. Xu Jingyong. Just hearing us with that. Sorry guys, this second half is gonna be slow, it seems. Oh, Meatbun has no mercy at all ever. That's wonderful. I was crying last night because I had thought of a climax for my novel, and now I get to cry about this tonight, so at least I'll have something else to cry about tonight. How could Moran not understand how Xu Jingyong felt right now? Okay, I'm not gonna read that again because I don't want to cry again. Xu Jingyong took another gulp of wine and lowered his head, let out a mirthless laugh. Like your dad or our friend from before, or your Shizun. No. You know why this cliff is called R? As refracted fragments of light. Moran knew what he wanted to say, but he was too distraught to hear about his dead father from Xu Jingyong just now. I know, it's because Uncle used to cry here. Ah. Xu Jingyong paused and blinked slowly, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deep. Did your aunt tell you? She wiped away his tears and took a deep breath. All right. Okay. Then you already know what Uncle wants to say. Go ahead and let it out if you're sad. It's all right. There's no shame in crying for someone. But Moran didn't cry. I'm crying. Can you at least have the decency to cry as well? Maybe his heart had already hardened into iron after 2 lifetimes of this. Compared to his devastation at Chimei's death back then, his current self was very calm. So calm that he was unsettled by his own numbness, surprised to find that he was really this heartless. Or you're in very deep shock. I'll give you the benefits of the doubt right now. Oopsie. Sorry about that. I don't know where my voice just went. Shizun finished drinking and stayed a while longer, then got to his feet rather unsteadily. Perhaps his legs had lost feeling from kneeling so long, or perhaps he had drunk too much. His broad hand clapped Moran on the shoulder. The heavenly rift's been closed, but we still don't know who's behind it all. Maybe that was the end of it, but there may be another big battle on the horizon. Renar, make sure you go down and eat something. Don't wreck your body. With that he turned and left. It was night, and outside Frostsky Hall, a waning crescent hung in the skies above. As he trod through the snow that blanketed the cliff year-round, half a skin of wine in hand, Shizhen Yong's voice, deep and rough like a broken gong, rang out in a short tune from Sichuan. Greetings, old friends, half but ghosts, meet only in cups of wine. Beneath the osmotus tree hides a pot of wine, a drink shared between time-worn faces and streaks of white. The first light of dawn shatters the dream, all depart, leaving me alone with my aged tears. I'd give what remains of my life to the god of dreams if only to call you back, cup after cup. Things were different from the past life, after all. The one who died wasn't Shimei, but Chuaning, and so Xu Zhengyong was stricken by an even deeper sorrow. With his back to the open gates of Frost Sky Hall, Moran listened to the lingering sound of that hoarse voice, resonant and mournful. Little by little, like an eagle soaring over the horizon, the voice grew distant, until it was swallowed by the wind and snow. The world was blanketed by a brilliant layer of white, and the moon high in the boundless sky washed over all till it was faint and insubstantial, leaving only one line that echoed over and over. Leaving me alone with my aged tears, leaving me alone with my aged tears. My tears have aged a decade since I started reading this freaking chapter. Okay. Xu Zhengyong is honestly such a nice man. Sorry, I can't see that word there, but I'm assuming it's nice. I do love him. The funny thing is, with things playing out the way they are now, it's so likely that the person who is this mysterious, like, orange thief, even though the fact that it's the mysterious orange thief is the thing that I'm like, is pushing me away from thinking that it's any of the main cast, but because of all the trauma that everyone has been put through, I feel like, it's likely to be any of them. Hell, it could even be a different version of Chuaning at this point, even though I can't imagine our dear sweet flower doing that. But again, as you said, Meat Bun has no mercy ever, so I'm not putting anything past her at this point. Not sure how much time had passed when he finally left Frost Sky Hall to begin his slow descent down the mountain. His uncle was right. The heavenly rift might be closed, but this affair was far from over. Chuaning was gone. If there were another battle, Moran would have to fend for himself. It was already late by the time he reached Mengpur Hall, and there was no one around save the old woman who made the late-night supper. Moran asked for a small bowl of noodles and found a corner spot in which to slowly eat. The noodles were hot and numbing, warm in his stomach. Mengpur Hall was dimly lit, and was dimly lit and hazy, when he glanced up through the thick screen of steam between ravenous bites. He recalled how stubborn he'd been after Shumei's death in his past life, how he'd refused to leave or eat for 3 whole days, and how later, when he had finally been convinced to leave for Sky Hall to eat something, he had happened across Chuaning in the kitchen, his back to Moran as he clumsily rolled wrappers and mixed filling. There had been flour and water on the table, and a few rows of wontons arranged in a neat line. Clang! The crash of every bit of it had been swept off the table, rang out from the bygone past, and stilled the chopsticks in the present Moran's hand. Suddenly it was hard for him to swallow. At the time he thought Chuaning was taunting him, that he purposely wanted to hurt him. But thinking back on it now, it was possible that Chuaning really didn't only want to make him a bowl of wontons in place of the departed Shumei. I mean, we knew it, but thank you for stating that again to just break my heart a little bit further. Okay, thank you for just clarifying that, because there was an icon in the way. He isn't he? And then you put yourself in his shoes. Yeah, I'm not gonna read the full sentence that you just wrote because I'm already on the verge of crying and I don't need to add to my own suffering. But yeah, I agree. How do you think you are? Do you have any right to use the things he used to make the food he made? Shmei is dead. Are you happy now? Or do you have to hound all your disciples to death or madness before you're satisfied? Chuaning, there's no one left in this world who could make those wontons ever again. No matter how much you imitate him, you'll never even come close. Each word stabbed to the heart. He went back to eating his noodles, unwilling to think any more on it. But it wasn't that easy. His memories gave him no peace. He remembered Chuaning's face in that moment, with awful clarity, clearer than ever before. His face had betrayed nothing, neither joy nor sorrow. He remembered every detail with an unprecedented sharpness. He remembered the faint tremble at the tips of those fingers, the smudge of flour on the plane of that cheek. He remembered the plump, snowy wontons scattered across the floor. He remembered how Chuaning had lowered his lashes and bent to carefully pick up those wontons, now unfit to eat, then thrown them away with his own hands. Thrown them away with his own hands. More than half of the noodles with peas was still left, but Moran couldn't stomach another bite. He pushed the bowl away and fled before the place could drive him insane. I think you're gonna find that every single place in this sect now reminds you of him, so good luck with that. He dashed madly through Session Peak as if trying to outrun the decade-long misunderstanding, as if trying to recover those ridiculous years, as if trying to catch up to that person who left Mainpur Hall that day all alone. Catch up to him so you could say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong to hate you." Deep black of the night, Moran ran aimlessly. He ran and ran, but everywhere he went he saw remnants of Chuaning's shadow. The platform of sin and virtue, where Chuaning had taught him to read and trained him in swordplay. READALONG Bridge, where he had shared an umbrella with him as they walked together. Meatbrand's really like saying this as if I don't remember every single painful moment that's about to flash through this man's head. Clear Sky Hall, where he had endured punishment by striking and left without anyone by his side. He felt more and more distraught, more and more helpless. Suddenly he ran into an open clearing, and it felt like the haze had dissipated, and he could once again see the bright moon above. He came to a stop, taking shuddering breaths. The heaven-piercing tower, the place where he had died in his last life, the place where he had first met Chuaning. Mayhem in his eyes, like a battlefield in chaos, with his heart beating wild like the pounding of war drums, powerless to ward off the tidal surge of the past, and helpless to avoid its relentless assault, he had been forced here in the end. Here, where the moonlight was palest white, and the breeze a gentle caress, where they had first met. Frick. One's away hurt me more than the stairs, to be honest. I feel like each one is its own very unique version of pain stabbing through my heart and down to my toes. But yeah, no, it's I think that for some reason the wontons just feel weirdly personal in comparison. Even though the other was literally just Chuaning giving his life up for Moran. So you can't really get more personal than that, but I totally get what you mean. So many flavors of suffering, indeed. Moran finally stopped running. He knew he couldn't escape it. In this life, he was bound to owe Chuaning. Slowly, Moran strode up the steps towards that magnificent high-tongued tree. He reached out and laid his palm on the bark of the trunk, dry and hard as a calloused heart. It had been nearly 3 days since Chuaning's death. Moran looked up, the flowering tree looking as gentle as ever. Only then did an unfathomable sorrow well up in his chest. With his forehead pressed to the trunk of the tree, he finally cried, his tears falling like rain. Shizun, Shizun, he muttered between choked sobs, over and over. He repeated those words he had spoken the day he first met Chuaning. Won't you pay attention to me? Please pay attention to me. But although the scenery remained the same, the people were no more. He stood before the heaven-piercing tower alone. No one would pay attention to him anymore. No one would ever meet him here again. I mean, to be fair, you still have the man that you murdered Chuaning for, albeit accidentally. So, you're not completely alone. But I'm glad you're feeling sorry. Because, yeah, you really need to reflect. Reborn Moran had the body of a youth, but within it was the soul of a 32-year-old Tashianjin. He had seen far too much of life and death, tasted all the joy and sorrow the world had to offer. Thus, in the reborn life, he had never displayed much genuine emotion. He had always remained mute, as if hidden behind a mask. Yet at present, the loss and anguish written on his face was so raw and vulnerable, so genuine and naive. Only now was he like an ordinary youth who had lost his Shizun. Like a child who had been abandoned like a stray dog that no longer had a home to return to. Pay attention to me, pay attention to me, please. In the end, the only reply was the rustle of leaves and the dancing, damp, shadows of flowers. The person with such striking features who had strode beneath the high-tongued tree that year could never again, lift his head to look at him. Not even one glance. That's it. I think Meat Bun hates me. I think she hates me. I don't think she likes me very much. I'm so sad right now. I mean, it's not like I think his death is permanent. That would be pretty awful to do to us, to like halfway through just never have Shizun again, because I was promised healing at some point. I'm assuming that's not what's happening. Like, we will eventually see Chuaning again, but that doesn't lessen the hurt I'm feeling right now. You're in an abusive relationship with Meat Bun. She hurts us, but then starts to love us, so we come back. The scary accuracy of that statement, it feels like, because every single time that we've had a very tragic scene so far, she would follow it up with such good humor that you kind of like, oh, the pain wasn't that bad, was it? I think I'm remembering it wrong. And then it hits you again and you're like, no, it's actually worse than I thought it was. It's so much worse. Okay. We're on to the next chapter. I will survive and persevere. Will I though? We shall see. But we are almost at chapter 100, so that is surprising. Okay. Page 131, chapter 99, Shizun's third weapon. Ooh, this is the one that we had foreshadowed. I'm so intrigued. Moran self-recriminated. Yeah. Self-recrimination, sorry, hurts so bad. That night, Moran slept propped against the high-tongued tree. There were many places in Shizun Peak that bore traces of Chuaning's presence. If he'd wanted to pay his respects, there was none more suitable than Red Lotus Pavilion. But only leaning against this tree dulled the ache in his heart. Only here could he feel a faint connection to the world of the living. He had once been certain that taking Chuaning as his master was the greatest misfortune of his life, that it had been a mistake from the start. Only now did he see that the unfortunate one wasn't Mo Wei, but the one who stood under the flowers that day, had bowed and lost in thought. The unfortunate one was Chuaning. Shenjun, pay attention to me. He seemed to vaguely recall those words as the first time he'd said. Recall those words as the first he had said to his Shizun. Maybe not those exact words. It had been too long ago, and he no longer remembered it clearly. But he could still remember vividly the look on Chuaning's face as his lashes flicked up, bewildered and startled. How gentle he had looked then. As he lay beneath the flowering tree, Moran thought that, if time could flow backwards, back to the day he chose his master, he absolutely shouldn't pester Chuaning into accepting him as a disciple again. No matter what, because the price exacted for that moment, for the flicker of those eyelashes, was the endless entanglement to follow, was Chuaning's very life. 2 lifetimes. His Shizun had come to ruin at his hands 2 lifetimes. Moran's throat worked in a swallow, and he closed his eyes against the threat of a sob. He paused a long while in an agony that felt as if a million ants gnawed at his heart before finally drifting into a fitful slumber. In his dreamscape, a fragment of memory he dared not touch since his rebirth rested free of its chains, raised its knife, and carved out its heart. And we're about to read it. I'm not ready. At the time, he had stood at the pinnacle of the human realm, and Chuaning, his spiritual core abolished, had been a prisoner in his palace. Did we know that his spiritual core had been abolished? I don't know if I knew that or if I just forgot that. I think I might have just forgotten it. It makes sense, because if he had even like an ounce of spiritual energy left, he wouldn't have stopped fighting against Chuaning. I mean, he barely stopped fighting against Moran. He barely stopped fighting against Moran as it was even with his spiritual energy abolished. Damn, okay. He had been targeted in recent days by several successive assassination attempts, the last presented by Xu Meng and Mei Hanxue. Although Moran was too powerful to yield his life to them, he had sustained grave injuries. He needed to convalesce for over a month within the confines of his palace before he recovered his strength. Sichuan was a damp place, even more so in those days, and the pitter-patter of rain could be heard day and night. Moran stood under the shelter of the colonnade, his fingers pale as jade, where they clutched the hem of the heavy brocade cloak draped over his shoulders. That has such a nice rhythm to it. Sorry, can I just reread that for a second? That has an amazing rhythm to it. Moran stood under the shelter of the colonnade, his fingers pale as jade, where they clutched the hem of the heavy brocade cloak draped over her shoulders. That sentence alone just made me feel so much better, just because that was so beautifully written. Okay, sorry, moving on. He gazed at the grey skies overhead, his countenance caught between mirth and madness. Even in silence, the twisted nature that radiated from him was unmistakable. He had been born with such a handsome face, yet the light in his eyes was dark and ruthless, devoid of warmth. The longer he sat on that throne, the darker it grew. Footfalls sounded behind him. "There you are," he said without looking back. "Are you going to lay waste to Kunlun Tashu Palace?" Chuaning's voice echoed faintly in the grand hall. "And what if I am?" A pause. "Have you forgotten your promise to me? You swore you wouldn't seek Shumeng's life." Moran's voice was even. "Shizun has come all this way and hasn't even stopped to ask after my injuries, or whether I'm cold standing out in the wind. He only cares who I'm going to kill. Moweyu, I came to tell you to stop doing things you'll live to regret." Huh, regret? Shouldn't you be the one who feels regret? You already shattered your core trying to stop me from raising Rufeng's sect. Now I'm going to raise Tashu Palace, and you're just an ordinary person, without the strength to oppose me. Don't you regret not minding your own business back then? If he's the Chuaning we know, he probably doesn't. Moran turned to glance at him over his shoulder, a flicker in his eyes and a cruel smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Chuaning, you're a worthless... I don't like that word. How are you going to stop me? What do you have left?" Chuaning could find no words for a long while, maybe because he really did have nothing left. A deafening clap of thunder suddenly split the skies, and rain poured forth, streaming down the roof and spilling from the eaves. Finally, Chuaning closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he only said quiet, "Don't go." Moran turned his heel with a swish of black robes. Against a backdrop of a torrential rain and freezing wind in an ash-grey sky, he looked at Chuaning within the hall. And why shouldn't I go? I already gave Shizun his chance back then. He submitted to me for his sake, and I kept my word and spared his life in exchange for your body. But now he's the one after my life. So tell me, why shouldn't I go? Chuaning looked at him in silence. Well, you have nothing to say? Moran scoffed. Go on, berate me. Curse me out. Say something. Chuaning, what happened to all that might of yours? I know Shimeng's your favorite, your prized disciple. He's earnest and sincere, and I'm no more than mud on the sole of his boot. That's enough. Chuaning's brows were knitted tight on his pale face, as if trying to suppress some emotion. It's not enough. How could it be? The sight of Chuaning's distress filled Moran's heart with a savage glee. Anger, ecstasy, hatred, and jealousy scorched his heart with their intensity, and his eyes glinted as he paced back and forth. There is no second chance, Chuaning. There's no second chance for him. I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to skin him for a rug, drink wine from his skull. I'll scoop his insides out, chop him up, and stew him. You can't stop me. Chuaning, you can't stop me. The more he raved, the more enraptured he grew. His eyes reddened. He was frenzied, crazed. Snap out of it. Suddenly a hand was twisted in the collars of his robes, and another struck him hard across the face. So close that Moran could see the quiver of his eyelashes and the shining tears in his eyes. Moran, wake up already. Wake up. I am awake. The burn of that clap on his cheek drove him only further into insanity. He glared at Chuaning's face, and his anger flared. I'm perfectly awake. You're the one who's asleep. Are you blind? Moran shoved Chuaning away and tore open the collar of his robes to reveal the blood-stained bandages across his chest. Are you blind, Chuaning? He roared, jabbing at his own chest, and when even that wasn't enough, ripped the gauze away completely to expose the bloody mess beneath. Who do you think did this? Your perfect little disciple, Shimeng. If he had aimed his longchin just a hair to the side, I'd be dead. So you tell me, why the hell should I let him go? As far as you're concerned, his life is a life, but mine counts for nothing. Is that it? It is very. Moran grabbed Chuaning's hand and pressed it to his bloody wound. Didn't you want to stop me? Here's your chance. Go on then, dig out my heart. Chuaning, why don't you dig out my heart? Chuaning was silent, the tips of his fingers trembling, cold as ice. Moran glared at him, fiercely, ruthlessly, the veins at his neck throbbing. Go on, he rasped, his voice raw. Dig it out. The torrents of rain against the roof was frenzied madness. Silence reigned. Neither moved. After an interval, Moran finally released Chuaning's hand and breathed low and harsh, declaring in a deep voice, Shiziming and Meihan Xue's lives are mine. Chuaning said nothing. Go ahead and hate me, Shizun, he said. My life's already come to this anyway. Our lives have already come to this. None can turn back now, so we might as well press on in this darkness. I'm merely dragging some old friends along for company on my way to hell. That day, Chuaning had gazed at the back of Moran's black robes. As he stalked away, he finally spoke. Moran, if you destroy Tashu Palace and kill Xu Meng, I will end my life in front of you. guys think Chuaning felt when he realized that how should I put it, Moran's hateful obsession with him was enough to be a bargaining chip? Because that kind of hurts my soul. I have nothing left to barter with, but at the very least I can still choose death. When he heard those words, Moran paused. He turned to look over his shoulder, and a smile spread across his handsome face as he stood against the dreary backdrop of wind and rain. So long as this venerable one draws breath, you'll not find death so easily. Chuaning only looked at him. Lest you forget, even when all the blood had drained from your body, I still snatched you back from the gates of death. You will be spending the rest of this life with me, no matter how much you disgust me. After venting his madness, Moran gradually regained his usual placid demeanor, cold and threatening. My dear Shizun, just behave yourself and wait here at Shizun Peak. When I capture Shimeng, I'll haul him back here so he can take a good look at the god he frets over night and day, writhing under me like a wanton little, I'm not going to say that word. In consideration of our shared past, it's only right that I grant him the courtesy of full comprehension before he dies, after all. But counter to all of Moran's expectation, Chu Zhongshi was still Chu Zhongshi. 1 month later, Moran stood proudly before a heavenly lake at the summit of Kunlun Mountain, and did exactly as he said he would. He captured Mei Hanxue and Shumeng and bound them to pillars of ice, then used the Zhenlong chess formation to induce the thousands of souls at Tashu Palace to slaughter one another as the two looked on. Just in case we forgot how purely evil Moran was in his past life, the snowy mountain, once pristine and majestic, was dyed crimson in an instant. Blood streamed into heavenly lake and seeped into the ground. Moran sat calmly before the palace gates, eating grapes, fetched by servants, and smiling as he oversaw the scene of destruction. Meng, do you like it? He glanced at Shumeng, whose eyes were glazed and unfocused. Shumeng remained silent and unresponsive, as if struck deaf. Pleased, Moran smiled still more affectionately and said, Your cousin staged the show just for you. Are you enjoying it? A faint murmur. Spare Tashu Palace. Moran blinked. What? Spare Tashu Palace. Shumeng's usually bright gaze was empty. Let them go. Let Mei Hanxue go. I was the one who tried to kill you. Kill me, leave everyone else out of it. Moran couldn't help but laugh. Are you trying to negotiate with me? No. Shumeng's eyes were hollow. I'm begging you. The darling of the heavens had said, I'm begging you. Moran's eyes gleamed. The demon in his heart reveled at these words. Faintly amused, he gripped Shumeng by the jaw and forced him to look up at him. Yet before he could speak, a burst of radiant green lit up the skyline. What's going on? His retinue had no chance to respond. A resplendent spiritual array flowed out over the towering summit to cover all the thousands of miles of Kunlun Mountain, and there above the array stood Chuaning, his robes white as snow, fluttering lightly among the clouds. A peculiarly shaped guqin hung in the air before him. It was black from end to end, with a tail that curved upward and ended in a flourish of blooming branches. each adorned with dew-laden high-tongue blossoms that glowed with a luminescent radiance. This was Chuaning's third holy weapon, Jyoga. Interesting. Is it the same character that makes up Moran's willow vine? Probably not, but interesting thought nonetheless. Sorry, I just want to check something. Oh damn! We're almost at the end of the stream. Where did the time go? And we're now at the end of a chapter. Now I don't know if I should continue reading. Let me read at least 2 more pages because we're not. No, let me try and read at least 4 more pages because we're not even to a 40-page mark right now. Okay, chapter 100, Shizun's last words. Moran's blood ran cold. He had only seen Chuaning's Guqin Jyoga once in his life, when he'd summoned it amidst their previous life or death battle. Then its cords had split the sky and sundered the clouds. Every entity under the control of Genlong chess formation, from the living people to the beasts and spirits, had recovered their consciousness at the sound of Jyoga's chords. One song had thrown Moran's million-strong army of chess pieces into utter disarray. Even so, summoning a holy weapon required the use of one's spiritual core and consumed a great deal of spiritual energy. Chuaning couldn't even call Tianwen anymore. How had he suddenly managed to call forth a Jyoga, a weapon even more powerful? The confrontation above Hemingway Lake that day had been no less fierce than the death match betwixt master and disciple years before. Yet Moran's memory of it was a muddy blur, because that bloody battle had left him without a single person by his side he could talk to. Truth be told, even up until his death in the last lifetime, Moran never had figured out how Chuaning was able to summon Jyoga using only the strength of his soul. It was a kind of connection not known to exist between any holy weapon and its master, but Chuaning had managed it. That day, Moran's Genlong chess pieces had crumbled to dust one after another at the thrum of the Guqin. Jyoga's strength was somehow even purer and more indomitable than the first time he'd witnessed it all those years ago. So much so that he suspected Chuaning's spiritual core hadn't been shattered at all, that he had merely been faking it all those years, had endured the indignities and bided his time, all for the chance to take his revenge in one fell swoop. More likely, he used his very soul to save the people that he loved, and that's what killed him. Just from my humble guess as someone who doesn't really know Chuaning but feels like I know Chuaning better than he does. That's what I meant to say. Later still, Moran couldn't help thinking it would have been better that way. If Chuaning really had simply been pretending, maybe things wouldn't have come to this point. If only. Jyoga nullified Moran's forbidden magic and returned awareness to the thousands of Taishu palace cultivators slaughtering each other. It even shattered the enchanted ice pillars that bound Shumeng and Meihan Shi. Moran leapt into the sky, robes flapping in the wind, his eyes flashing with anger and delight in equal measure. How many more surprising skills did Chuaning have up his sleeve? He couldn't wait to find out. He landed atop of the barrier and strode across it to stand before Chuaning. That pair of slender pale hands slowed, then laid themselves over the strings of the Guqin, muting at sound. Chuaning lifted his head, his face the color of snow beneath the sun. He spoke. Moran, come closer. Moran walked over, though he couldn't say why he did so. Chuaning lifted his fingers and a stream of jade-colored light arched towards Moran's chest. He was startled at first, thinking that Chuaning meant to kill him, but the light didn't hurt at all. It only hovered before his chest, then melted slowly into his skin and flesh, suffusing him with untold warmth. I've healed the wound Chuaning gave you. Chuaning breathed a soft sigh. So let him off, Moran. If even he's gone, when you want to reminisce about the past, who will you have to go? Who will you go to? Sorry. Moran was still processing the meaning behind these words when the sturdy barrier beneath his feet winked out of existence, along with Chuaning's Jyoga. He swiftly raised his hand to call Bugwe so as to maintain his footing between the clouds, but Chuaning fell, gentle as a wilted leaf. We just went through his death in the current timeline. Do we really have to go through it in the past timeline as well? Oh, goodness. As if his playing had exhausted the last of his strength. Waning! Moran's expression shifted instantly. He urged his blade down, catching Chuaning in his arms moments before he plunged into the icy waters of Heavenly Lake. Chuaning, you... Chuaning's eyes were closed. Blood trickled from his nose, his mouth, his eyes, his ears. This man had ever valued his dignity. Even in the years he was imprisoned within Wushan Palace, he had kept his back ramrod straight and rarely presented himself as aught other than prim and pristine. But now he bled from all 7 orifices of his face, and his usually clear and refined countenance was a dishevelled mess. Chuaning swallowed a mouthful of blood. You said that life or death is not up to me. But you see, Moran, his voice was hoarse, you've underestimated your Shizun after all. If I've made up my mind to leave, you can't stop me, no matter how you try. Shizun. Shizun? Moran stared at him, feeling a chill wash over his heart, feeling his scalp go numb as he called out, helpless. Chuaning smiled, his expression almost relieved. I've held on to life these past few years because I didn't want to give up. I was afraid of that. I was afraid that the only reason why he hadn't killed Moran was because he still hoped he could help him get back to how he used to be. Thinking that I'd just keep you company a little longer, try and teach you not to commit any more sins. But now he's lost faith in Moran. Sorry, that's not the book, that's me. Moran trembled as he held the man in his arms. He suddenly felt terrified. Terrified. Such an emotion had no part of him for more than 10 years. But now it rushed back in a wave, nearly carving out his heart. Now I see that, perhaps, it will take my death for you to stop doing evil. He fell silent, as if in immense pain. Is that physical pain or emotional pain? That's the question. I know what my answer is. Summoning Juga had been more than his body could withstand. His insides were ripping apart. Another mouthful of blood spilled from his lips. Moran, cradling him in his arms, touched down on the shore of Heavenly Lake. He channeled spiritual energy into Chuaning's chest without pause, his expression crazed and anguished. But that powerful stream of spiritual energy only sank uselessly into Chuaning's body, like water through a sieve. Moran panicked. Shizun clutched the man in his arms tight to himself, trying and failing again and again to pass him spiritual energy. It's useless, Moran. I used the last of my life to summon Jyoga. This is the end for me. But if you yet have any clarity in your heart, then please forgive. Forgive who? Shimon, Mehanshu, Kunlun Tashu Palace, or the entire cultivation world? Yes, yes, he'd forgive them all, so long as Chuaning lived. So long as the man he hated to his very core didn't die like this. That sure sounds like someone who definitely hates his Shizun. I won't say anything, it's fine. Let him live in denial for a little bit. I mean, that's all he's been doing, but still. The worst part is, I haven't checked yet, but I think he's gonna say himself. Like, not Chuaning asking for forgiveness of himself. Chuaning saying Moran should forgive himself, Moran. Am I making sense? I don't think I am. I think I'm too distraught. Chuaning raised a trembling hand and a cold fingertip, as if out of pity, but also almost tender, poked lightly at Moran's forehead. Then please forgive yourself. Damn it! They just had to go there. The ferocity in Moran's face froze in a rictus. Forgive whom? As he lay dying, just whom was he worrying over? Forgive yourself? Was that what he'd said? As he held Chuaning, Shizun was at something of a loss, but also somewhat delighted, racked by misery, but also perfectly content. Forgive myself? Moran muttered, his eyes bloodshot. Your last wish is for me to forgive myself? He burst into laughter, and the sound pierced the sky like a raging inferno, burning away all the reason and rationality. Ha! Forgive myself? Chuaning, you're even crazier than me. How naive! Huh! The slopes of Kunlun Mountain echoed with his deranged, miserable laughter, twisted, unrecognizable, terrifying. Chuaning swallowed another mouthful of blood, surrounded by the sound of Moran's insanity. Had he still possessed the strength, his expression would have been one of anguish. But he no longer even had the wherewithal to furrow his brows. Only that pair of phoenix eyes, those eyes that had been at times sharp or resolute or harsh or gentle, were now filled with sorrow. Moran, wait, hold on, I almost missed the entire chunk. Clear as the snow over Heavenly Lake, clouded as the frost lining the roof tiles. Slowly, Chuaning's eyes grew unfocused, and his pupils dilated. Slowly, what had once been bright and sharp as lightning could no longer see distinctly. After a spell, he said in a quiet voice, "Don't laugh anymore. I can't bear to see you like this." Moran had no reply. Moran, everything that happened in this life, it's all because I failed to teach you well, because I called you vile and beyond remedy. It was I who wronged you. I won't blame you, in this life or in death. No color remained on Chuaning's bloodless face. Even his lips were a pale blue. He lifted his gaze with a great effort to look at Moran. He wanted to cry, but instead it was blood that flowed from his eyes and slid down his cheeks. Chuaning wept. Do you truly hate me so much that you won't grant me a moment of peace, even at the very end? Moran, Moran, don't do this anymore. Wake up, turn back, turn back. Wake up. I'm gonna have to stop it here because, like, we're already 10 minutes past the hour, or like 8 minutes past the hour, but there's no like end in sight. We're not particularly near the end of a chapter or anything like that. And this one was a rough one, so we're gonna be stopping kind of like after the first paragraph of page 144, sorry. And then I will see you guys again on Thursday, same time as today. I know last week we had it earlier, but that was just because of because of certain circumstances. So this week will not be. I'm gonna really try and be consistent with the time and the schedule with regards to the read along. So on Thursday, same time as this one started, there is gonna be a scheduled live, so you can put up a notification if you would like. Thanks for the stream. Thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sitting through all my weeping. I'm sorry I'm such an emotional wreck, but I hope you guys could still hear what was going on through all the sobbing. And yeah, I hope you guys still enjoyed it in some way. I guess I'll see you on Thursday. Zajin.